Today we're going to look at a speech made by Paul Keating called The Funeral Service of the Unknown Australian Soldier. It was given in 1993. I'm just going to start by giving you a little bit of context. Paul Keating was the 24th Australian Prime Minister, and he served from 1991 to 1996, and he was a member of the Labor Party. This particular speech was delivered on the 11th of November, which is Remembrance Day, in 1993, and that was 75 years after the end of World War I. It was given at the interment of the remains of an unknown soldier from the Western Front at an Australian War Memorial Shrine in Canberra. Okay, in the speech, Keating's tone is formal and reflective. It's appropriately fitting for the occasion of a state event. This event was held holding the funeral on the 75th anniversary of the armistice adds depth to the purpose of commemorating this unknown soldier, and it gives Keating a sizable platform for his message. He also takes this as an opportune moment to create action. There's a bit of a political motivation to create and foster a new Australian identity. Start by looking at the first paragraph now, and one of the most obvious things that comes to us is the anaphora, or the repetition, in particular of the phrase, "we do not know." This anaphora symbolises every person in Australia, regardless of their race, gender, religion or social class. Keating's able to connect himself with all of the people of his audience to show that we are all grieving for this unknown soldier. He establishes some sense of ethos, allowing him to speak on behalf of the Australian people. The use of the word "we" on a regular occasion is inclusive language, and this establishes a link between the unknown soldier and all of Australia. A little further down, we can see a sentence that shows some binary opposites. The sentence is, we do not know who loved him or whom he loved. These binary opposites encompass all of the possibilities of who the unknown soldier was, blurring any distinction. We don't know if he was male or female, civilian or soldier. At the end we have, we will never know who this Australian was. Just anonymous, and that makes us feel some sense of curiosity, and we relate there is a relationship formed between the speaker and the audience. The other thing that this line does is it emphasises the futility of war, because we have lost lives, but we've somehow gained a legend, and this legend is something that we actually base our national identity on. The second paragraph now, and the thing that stands out the most in this paragraph is that there's lots of numbers in it. These numbers are a variety of statistics in relation to the war and Australians' relationship to war. The statistics create a sense of awe and make us honour the contribution and sacrifice of this Australian and all Australians, and it enables us as Australians now to acknowledge the efforts of past Australians in war, and their efforts is what has preserved our Australian way of life. Also, it makes the audience take a moment to realise the immense cost of war, and it communicates the idea that peace is one of the most valued human commodities, and that it is peace that should be pursued and not war. The next paragraph is very short and very powerful and is surrounded by pauses, so Paul Keating has said this in a way that makes us all listen to it. The paragraph is simply, "He is all of them and he is one of us." That is saying that this soldier represents everyone within the Australian community. It somehow makes the audience feel incredibly proud because we relate to him and we are represented by someone who fought with such honour and bravery in a selfless manner for the benefit of all. To stanza 4. And stanza 4 starts with a simile. This Australia and the Australia he knew are like foreign countries. Keating is pointing out that the contemporary Australia that we're all standing in now has moved away from the Britishness of past eras and the Britishness that the unknown soldier would have known. It also moves on to talk about, to give a hyperbole. The hyperbole is the section where it says it's so dramatic, so vast, and all-consuming. This shows us the emotional shift in the audience away from the monarchy. This particular paragraph then ends with his duty, the duty he owed to his country and his king. This is a little bit foreign to the listeners as well, because we talk less about our duty to our king, but the Anzac legend was certainly one that was based on a sense of duty, a sense of adventure, a sense of larrikinism and masculinity, and also a sense of serving the monarchy. Moving on now to paragraph 5, it begins very strongly with, because the Great War was a mad, brutal, awful struggle. That's a great list of words. We call it an accumulation, and the accumulation highlights the horrors of war by conceding the accountability at the hands of previous Australian governments, whereas Keating's honesty and demand for respect of the unknown soldier creates a more affable image, which really does add to his persona. This particular paragraph ends well as well. It actually has a cliche in the middle. The cliche is, because the war, which is supposed to end all wars, which obviously we know it didn't. This war didn't end all wars. Keating here makes the argument that monarchies started these horrible wars where millions of innocent people were killed. Therefore, after so many years of change in the world, why does Australia still have a monarchist constitution? Surely so many Australians did not fight to see no gain. By degradation of the monarchy for its responsibility for the incredible loss of life, Keating is in fact presenting his favour of a substitute form of government, and that is a republican system. We're now going to skip down to paragraph 7, which says, "For out of the war came a lesson which transcended the horror and tragedy and the inexcusable folly." The folly is a reference to the folly of the British officers who were blamed for what Australia was involved in. And the lesson is that about ordinary people, and the lesson was that they aren't ordinary. An ordinary person can achieve the same kind of greatness as the unknown Australian soldier. Keating uses this concept to develop his view of the Australian identity and sees this identity as free and independent, and essentially as democratic, and moving away from things like the folly of the British officers. In paragraph 8, we can see that what Keating is trying to do is he's trying to forge a new identity of Australians, and that's Australians who endure hardship, who show courage, who are bold and resilient, and who believe in ourselves and who stick together. He's not glorifying war, but honouring the sacrificed lives of all the soldiers from all countries and all of those who are involved. Moving along to paragraph 9, which begins with the unknown Australian soldier we inter today. The soldier remains anonymous and becomes a synecdoche, and this is somebody who represents the many or represents all. So he becomes a synecdoche for all demographics and past conflicts, reiterating the inclusiveness of the audience and once again associating them with the soldier. Moving down now to paragraph 11, that says, "It is a democratic tradition, the tradition in which Australians have gone to war ever since." This is a real democratic voice, or one that shows Keating's belief in the egalitarian nature of the Australian people. Moving down to the paragraph that starts with, "This unknown Australian is not interred here to glorify war over peace." One of the most noticeable parts of this particular paragraph is the use of the semicolon. So that's Keating's paused here to add solemnity to the event. There's a sort of accumulation because you can see the list that he is creating, and he's creating a list of the egalitarian idea and a list of all people, and not glorifying any war over another war, or not glorifying any people above any other people. Paragraph 14 says, "His tomb is a reminder of what we have lost in war and what we have gained." So we can see the opposites coming through here with loss and gain, and what they do is they emphasize the futility of war. We have lost lives, but we've gained a legend, and that's the legend on which our national identity is based. This refers back to an earlier section and shows the patriotic voice that Keating is showing here. We have lost more than 100,000 lives, and with them all their love of this country and all their hope and energy. In these concluding paragraphs of his speech, Keating reaffirms the irrelevance of the monarchy in Australia and would like a shift to a republican system. He believes this shift is central to the development of our Australian identity. So we can see his republican voice coming out here. He offers the juxtaposition of what has been sacrificed for gain. He's challenging us, he's challenging the audience to call for a republic and to equalise the disparity that is created for the monarchy. And by asking for people to equalise the disparity, he's showing his egalitarian nature. 16, which begins "We've gained a legend," there's a bit of an irony here, because even though the soldier isn't actively serving in the army, he is serving our country, in that he's serving as a legend and as something that can bring the country together. Keating argues that the unknown soldier will continue to serve his country in the future as a symbol of the unification of the country. His message is therefore aimed at unifying his audience with inclusive language.
I guess in conclusion, Ms. Gabbett and I just want to add a couple of points. The voices that we really want you to focus on are that of the patriot. We can see that he is a Prime Minister so proud of his country, wanting our independence from Britain. And that kind of leads into the second one there, which is Republican. The freedom from the shackles of monarchy is really important to Keating's platform, and it was something that he pushed very much as a Prime Minister and never achieved, and we're still to achieve it. So this is a speech that is still important, it's still contemporary for our Australian audience. And the final voice that we really would like you to focus on too is the egalitarian. And the nature of being egalitarian is that everyone gets a fair go. We work very hard for what we achieve in our lives, and we should feel really proud to be Australian, because there's not every country in the world where you're allowed to live a dream, and that's very important for our study of Keating. In conclusion, on the purpose of the speech, again we can look at it in a threefold way. The first one there is commemoration. Those who have died and served for Australia in conflicts. It's a really important purpose of his speech. The second one there is his political agenda, which is the underlying subtext of the whole speech. He wants to forge a new Australian identity that is completely separate from monarchy. And the final focus of purpose of his speech would be the cultural values that he wants people to take on. So the Anzac legend, the idea of adventure, larrikinism, but also standing up for your mates, being there for people in times of trouble, and working hard under pressure. They are really the values that he's trying to get across in his purpose. To comment on the audience, we need to know that the speech was televised nationwide, and it's something that appealed to old Australians, new Australians, to multicultural Australia, for people who served in wars, and for people who lost loved ones in the wars, and also for the younger generation who really hadn't experienced any war. It still appealed to them. Finally, on the textual integrity of the speech. Now, this speech is a historical reference point for Australia. It marks a point in our military history, our social and cultural history, and political history. The second point is that Keating has crafted language using lots of rhetorical features that are fitting for a solemn occasion, and it is a eulogy. So a eulogy is a model of an effective speech. You see his structure, you see his pauses, he builds on an idea throughout the speech, and he really grasps a truth about Australian identity in the end. And that means that this speech is a document that has bound the nation, that binds the nation. And it's a fitting celebration of the duty, service, and patriotism, sacrifice, and nationhood that comes from the idea of serving your country, that sense of duty. And finally, it builds our national identity. And I think that's probably the main thing that you need to take from this speech. He is trying to build identity through using distinctive voices, and hopefully he's hoping he will harness the idea of a republic over a monarchy.